The MiG-9 first flew in 1946, at a moment when the Soviet Union knew it had fallen dangerously behind the West in jet technology. Using engines derived from captured German designs, it gave the Soviet air arm its first operational jet capability, and bought engineers the time and experience needed to build something far more competitive. The Yak-15 first flew in 1946, as the Soviet Union scrambled to field jet fighters with whatever technology was available. Built on a modified piston-era airframe with a single turbojet, it was never a frontline combat aircraft, rather a controlled step, a way to train Soviet pilots in jet flight without waiting years for an entirely new design. The Yak-17 took to the skies in 1947 as the Soviet air arm worked to standardize jet operations across its pilot force. An incremental refinement of the Yak-15 with improved ground handling, it served as a practical transition tool, giving frontline pilots confidence with jet propulsion before more demanding and capable aircraft entered widespread service. The Yak-23 first flew in 1947 as a lightweight jet fighter designed to help Soviet-aligned Eastern Bloc air forces transition into the jet age quickly and affordably. Its simple construction and ease of maintenance made it well suited to air arms with limited infrastructure, and it served as a credible frontline type across several Warsaw Pact nations during the early Cold War. The MiG-15 first flew in 1947 as the Soviet Union's answer to growing American air power, designed to intercept the strategic bombers the West was deploying across Europe. When it appeared over Korea in 1950, it stunned Western pilots with its swept-wing performance, forcing a rapid reassessment of Soviet capabilities and reshaping fighter doctrine on both sides. The LA-15 first flew in 1948 as Lavochkin's bid to stay competitive in a Soviet aviation industry consolidating around MiG. A capable swept-wing interceptor with a single turbojet, conventional fuselage, and distinctive T-tail, it reached around 1,000 kilometers per hour, but lost the production race to the simpler and cheaper MiG-15, ending Lavochkin's fighter ambitions. The MiG-17 first flew in 1950, as the Soviet Union refined its frontline fighter to keep pace with faster Western jets emerging over Europe. With a more sharply swept wing and an available afterburning engine, it exceeded 1,100 kilometers per hour and remained lethal well into the Vietnam era, where its agility gave it a real edge against nominally superior opponents. The Yak-25 first flew in 1952 to defend the Soviet Union's vast northern frontier against Western bombers approaching through the Arctic. A twin-engine interceptor with radar and a tandem two-crew cockpit, it was built purely for long-range threat detection and elimination, not for dogfighting, but for hunting intruders across thousands of kilometers of remote airspace. The MiG-19 first flew in 1953 as the Soviet Union pushed to achieve supersonic parity with the West, where American fighters were already approaching the sound barrier. Twin afterburning engines carried it past Mach 1 in level flight for the first time in Soviet aviation history, marking a significant shift in the performance the Warsaw Pact could field against NATO. The MiG-21 began development in the mid-1950s as the Soviet Union sought a fast, cheap, and mass-producible fighter it could export to Allied nations worldwide. A lightweight delta-wing design capable of around Mach 2, it became the backbone of Soviet-aligned air forces on every continent, built in numbers no Western fighter of its era could match. The Su-7 first flew in 1955 as a swept-wing supersonic fighter intended to give Soviet tactical aviation a speed advantage over NATO aircraft in a European conflict. Capable of around Mach 1.6, its role shifted toward ground attack as doctrine evolved, but its powerful engine and robust airframe made it a durable workhorse for Soviet-aligned air forces across 2 decades. The Su-9 first flew in 1956 as a direct response to high-altitude Western reconnaissance aircraft penetrating Soviet airspace with near impunity. A delta-wing interceptor capable of around Mach 1.8, It was built to climb fast and engage with radar-guided missiles rather than guns, reflecting Soviet doctrine that speed and missiles, not cannon, would define future air defense. The Su-11 first flew in 1958 as a focused improvement over the Su-9, developed to close coverage gaps in Soviet air defense as Western aircraft grew more capable and harder to intercept. With an uprated engine and improved radar, it reached around Mach 1.8 and bolstered the air defense network in a period when the Soviet Union could not yet field a more advanced replacement. The Yak-28P first flew in 1960 to give Soviet air defense a supersonic interceptor capable of patrolling the country's enormous northern and eastern borders. Capable of around Mach 1.9 and equipped with radar and missiles, its twin-engine endurance and tandem crew configuration allowed it to cover the vast distances that shorter-ranged single-seat fighters simply could not. The Tu-128 first flew in 1961 to address a vulnerability unique to the Soviet Union, the vast Siberian interior where radar was sparse and no airfield sat close enough for a conventional scramble. It was the largest fighter ever to enter operational service. The Su-15 first flew in 1962 as a pure homeland defense interceptor, built with one purpose: to destroy intruders before they reached Soviet cities or strategic sites. Capable of exceeding Mach 2 and directed entirely by ground controllers, it carried only missiles and was never designed to stray beyond Soviet airspace. The MiG-25 first flew in 1964 as a direct response to American high-altitude threats the Soviet Union could not reliably intercept, including the SR-71 reconnaissance aircraft. Built for speed above all else, it reached around Mach 2.8, operationally using powerful engines and a largely steel structure engineered to endure extreme aerodynamic heating at altitude. The MiG-23 first flew in 1967 as the Soviet answer to NATO's growing tactical air power in Europe, where a fixed wing was no longer enough. Its variable sweep geometry gave Warsaw-Pact pilots flexibility across both high-speed interception and close maneuvering. The Yak-38 first flew in 1971 as the Soviet Navy's bid to project air power from carriers without American-style catapult systems. Operating from Kiev-class decks using vectored thrust and lift jets, it reached around Mach 0.95 and gave the Soviet fleet a fighter presence at sea for the first time. Limited in performance, but significant as a statement of naval ambition. The MiG-31 first flew in 1975 to close a critical gap in Soviet air defense: the inability to track and engage multiple low-flying cruise missiles simultaneously across the Arctic approaches. With a phased array radar and speeds around Mach 2.8, it gave the Soviet military a long-range intercept capability that no previous fighter had been able to provide. The Su-27 first flew in 1977 as a direct response to the American F-15, built after the Soviet military concluded that NATO had pulled ahead in air superiority over Europe. Capable of around Mach 2.3 with fly-by-wire controls and a heavy missile load, it became the cornerstone of Soviet air power and the foundation for an entire family of derivatives. The MiG-29 first flew in 1977 to give Warsaw-Pact frontline air forces a fighter capable of taking on NATO's new lightweight jets, especially the F-16, from dispersed forward bases with minimal support. Capable of around Mach 2.3 and equipped with a helmet-mounted sight, it was designed to win the first engagement over the European front, fast and without warning. The Su-33 first flew in 1987 as the Soviet Navy pushed to give the Admiral Kuznetsov a genuine air superiority capability at sea. Derived from the Su-27 with folding wings, reinforced landing gear, and a canard configuration to reduce approach speed, it is capable of around Mach 2.1 and remains Russia's sole carrier-borne air superiority fighter today. The Su-30 flew in 1989 as a two-seat derivative of the Su-27, designed to extend Soviet interception range deep into the Arctic on long-endurance patrols. After the collapse, it became Russia's most successful fighter export, generating the revenue that kept much of the defense industry alive through the difficult 1990s, while remaining capable of around Mach 2. The MiG-35's production prototype flew in 2016, as Russia worked to modernize its light fighter fleet and offer an upgraded option to existing MiG-29 operators worldwide. With an active electronically scanned array radar and improved range, it reaches around Mach 2.2, though it competes for limited defense funding against the Su-57, leaving its production future uncertain. The Su-35 first flew in 2008 as Russia's stopgap air superiority solution, while the Su-57 remained years from production. Built to maintain relevance against advancing Western and Chinese fighters, it combines thrust vectoring engines with a new radar system, reaches around Mach 2.2, and bridges Soviet flanker technology with Russia's fifth-generation ambitions. The Su-57 first flew in 2010 as Russia's bid to restore stealth parity with the West after years of falling behind. With internal weapons bays, reduced radar cross-section shaping, and advanced sensor fusion, it reaches around Mach 2 with supercruise capability. Serial deliveries from 2020 marked Russia's long-awaited entry into fifth-generation aviation.